Just a few days ago, the family were happily discussing their upcoming trip. Everyone looked forward to escaping the daily hustle and bustle, to relax on a warm sandy beach under the bright southern sun. The youngest daughter, Julie, dreamed of lying on white sand, enjoying the ocean view and watching surfers ride the waves. Kevin, the eldest and most responsible child in the family, was meticulously checking their packing list before the flight. Everything was ready, and it seemed nothing could disrupt their plans for a perfect vacation. But that morning everything went wrong. First, traffic jams, then ticket problems and tense conversations with airline representatives. In the end, they missed their flight. The dreams crumbled like a house of cards. Instead of soaring through clouds at 10,000 meters, the mother and her 2 children drove back through familiar streets, feeling heavy devastation. "Kids, since we couldn't get away, let's surprise Daddy," Daisy suggested on the way home. "I meant to call him earlier, but hadn't gotten around to it." "No point now, the surprise is already here," Kevin sighed. "We'll be stuck here in the snow all vacation." "Is that really such a tragedy?" Daisy shrugged, parking in front of their house. "Well, whatever is done is for the best, and besides, New Year's vacation at home can be good too. It's still a holiday. Christmas trees, snows, sledges, and frost might not be a beach, but winter has its own charm. There's so much snow this year, it's truly beautiful." "You know, I'm actually glad we didn't fly away," said Kevin. "Let's go to a proper ski resort. I can't remember the last time I went skiing." Daisy could tell her son was trying to support her and cheer up his sister, so she eagerly joined in. "That's the spirit, Kevin. Snowboarders or surfers, what's the difference?" "True. At least with skiing, we'll only risk broken legs. Surfers can get eaten by sharks," Julie joked darkly. Everyone laughed. "What about surprising Dad?" Daisy smiled. "He's probably at work. We could make something nice for dinner and then meet him at his office. He'll be so happy to see us. But even if he just comes home and sees us, that's good too. Come on, let's unload and get started cooking." Daisy took out her keys and handed them to Kevin. "Go ahead and open the door. Hurry up." Kevin grabbed the 2 largest suitcases and headed for the elevator. He's growing up, his mother thought, watching her 14-year-old confidently handle their heavy luggage. Kevin, of course, as always, acted with speed and lightning, opening the door and being the first to drag the 2 bags into the apartment. Entering the hallway, Daisy immediately tripped over her son's shoe, and he was already rushing to the bathroom door. "Hold on, Meteor, there's still stuff in the car." "Let me wash my hands first," Kevin said seriously, but he was already dashing back out. "Mum, there's a woman in there." "Where? What do you mean?" Daisy remembered her daughter standing behind her and turned around. Julie's face was broken. She seemed unable to believe either Kevin's words or her own ears. "Stay here, I'll check," Daisy said and strode to the bathroom. Her son was right. In the transparent shower cabin stood a woman with long dark hair. Daisy closed the bathroom door, frantically trying to decide what to do with her children present. She needed to get them away from this nightmare. The thought struck her like lightning. But at that moment the shower stopped and the woman's wet head peeked out from behind the glass. "Honey bunny, are you home? Bring me a towel." Her full scarlet lips stood out on her flushed face. "I'm sorry, but you might have mixed up the apartment. Are you sure you're in the right place?" Daisy muttered, saying the first thing that came to mind. "Where's my honey bunny?" the woman asked, looking out from the shower cabin, her eyes wide with surprise. "Who?" Daisy asked, though she immediately understood. "You mean Lane?" After a brief pause, the stranger nodded. Daisy wanted to say something appropriate, but words failed her. Nothing about this was normal. "Daddy?" came a voice from the hallway. Daisy peeked out from the bathroom. There stood her husband in the doorway, fresh from outside. He was clearly in high spirits, evident from the smile he hadn't managed to hide and the champagne bottle in his hand. Julie and Kevin stared at their father in silence. Lane finally spoke. "I took the day off. Why aren't you on your flight?" "Important things came up," Daisy replied. "I see you've made other plans too." "Ah," he nodded. "I thought you'd left, so I bought champagne." "Yes, I can see the champagne. I'm not blind." Daisy took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts. He'd bought champagne thinking they were gone, for that woman in the bathroom. What now? She wondered. "So you have—" She nodded toward the bathroom. "A guest. The champagne's for her?" "Yes." Lane, more composed than his wife, set the bottle on the shelf under the mirror, smoothed his hair and tucked his hands in his jean pockets. "This play was unnecessary," he said confidently. "My play? What do you mean?" "Stop pretending. You must have known for a while. Though I'm at fault too. I wasn't very discreet. Only a fool wouldn't have noticed. I thought you were being wise, understanding that family matters more than a temporary and meaningless affair, and choosing not to make a scene. I actually admired you for it. Who knew it would end so predictably? But why fake a cancelled flight? Coming back and dragging the kids into it? Couldn't you have waited for things to settle naturally?" "What needs to settle?" came an anguished voice from the bathroom. Daisy pressed herself against the door, holding it shut. The last thing they needed was this woman bursting out without her clothes or towel into the hallway. "What do you mean, settle? Honey bunny, what about your promises? You said you loved me, that you wished we'd met sooner, that you'd waited your whole life for me." The woman tried to get from the bathroom, but Daisy held the door harder. "At least throw a towel over yourself," Lane shouted, helping to prop the door open. "There are children here." "What did you promise me?" yelled the woman. "What did you tell me? Have you forgotten? That you'd decide everything yourself. You only had to wait a little while." "What was I supposed to tell you? The truth? That I just wanted to have fun? Who knew you were such a fool?" Lane yelled back. "Everyone around you is a fool," Daisy breathed, struggling to restrain her husband's furious mistress. "The wife is a fool who didn't understand anything. The mistress is also a fool." "To hell with you both, just leave me alone." Lane gritted his teeth. A vein swelled in his neck, and at this moment he barely looked human. "Scoundrel, you have no conscience." The door burst open with such force that Daisy was thrown aside. "Children, go to your room," she called quickly. Julie gasped and covered her eyes with both hands. Just in time, as Lane's mistress tumbled out, fortunately in the bathrobe. "Julie, let's go for a walk," Kevin said quickly. Julie, hands still over her eyes, walked out of the apartment with her brother. "I'm leaving too," Daisy said. "We're clearly not welcome here." "Wait, don't make a scene," said Lane. "Let's sort this out quietly." "No, I've had enough," Daisy snapped, panting. "Maybe if the children and I hadn't seen this spectacle, I would have stayed, but not now. You deal with her." She glared at her husband's mistress. There she was in the middle of the room, sobbing, and with her black hair dripping wet. She looked like a drenched chicken, at least to Daisy's eyes, pathetic and laughable at once. Daisy regarded her with a mixture of disgust and derision. Lane stood in shocking silence, his emotions a grimy cocktail of shame, frustration, and horror at his spectacular failure, and in front of everyone. "What an ugly ending," Daisy muttered. "Well, I'm done here." She left the apartment and went downstairs. "Good thing we hadn't unloaded everything from the car," she thought. "Though we don't have much anyway. We'll come back for the winter clothes later." The children stood by the car, talking quietly. "Why are you standing here? Get in," Daisy said. "Where are we going?" Kevin asked, opening the car door. "That's a good question. It's getting dark." Daisy looked at her son and made a sudden decision. "Let's go to the village. Grandfather's house is still there. We can rest and spend the night." They stopped for food on the way to the village, having eaten nothing since breakfast before the airport. The longer journey proved beneficial, giving them time to calm down. Only as they approached the village did Daisy realise she had unconsciously severed ties with her entire former life. What would they do now? Live in this village? Stoke the stove and shovel snow at this house, which was 3 times smaller than their city apartment? "Mum, are we almost there?" Julie asked from the back seat. "I'm sleepy." "Almost there, Julie." Daisy stopped the car. "There's our house." They had to trudge through the snowy road to reach the cabin, only 50 metres, but walking through ankle-deep, crunchy snow while carrying bags made it feel like a marathon. Daisy forged ahead, making a path for the children. "Just what I needed," she thought bitterly. "This is what happens when you stay away from your paternal home too long. You have a husband, nice apartment in a new district, and then out of the blue you're shovelling snow. My own fault." "Mum, I'm tired, and snow's getting in my shoe," came a whining voice behind her. "We're almost there, Julie," Daisy replied without turning. "Just a little further, sweetie." "Mum, why are we here? We could have gotten a hotel room." "We'd have to come here in the morning anyway, so stop whining," Kevin cut in. "Thank you, Kevin," Daisy said sincerely. "What would I do without you, sonny?" The gate they'd struggled to reach was latched from inside. Kevin shook his head, then brightened. "I can fix this." He pulled himself up and over the fence. "Hey, the snow's knee-deep here," his cheerful voice called. "Julie, pass me that thermos from the side pocket." "Planning a tea break?" his sister grumbled, but tossed it over. "No, dummy. I'll pour hot water on the latch to thaw it. By the way, do we have house keys?" Kevin asked. "Or should I break a window?" "We have them," Daisy assured him as they entered through the gate. "Here, under the doormat." Kevin carefully turned the key twice in the lock. "Well, at least that house is without any surprises," he muttered. "I'll get the suitcases. Go on in." Daisy entered first. The musty smell of an empty house hit her immediately. "Mum," her daughter whispered, "this feels weird." "We'll heat the furnace, so don't worry, dear." "I'll handle that," Kevin grunted, dragging in their travel bag. "Just check the barn, not much wood, but it's dry. We'll stay warm." Daisy walked over to the old dresser and gingerly touched the cold mirror. She unbuttoned her down jacket and pulled the scarf off her head. "Here I am home. Here I am back," she thought. "What's next? That's still a big question." "Well, Mum, why are you standing like frozen?" Kevin said softly. "Let's fire up the furnace, make some tea and have a snack." The woman was grateful to her son this evening. If it hadn't been for Kevin, she probably would have been completely lost. It was good to have him, calm, judicious, keeping his wits about him. "Kevin, do you need my help?" she asked, peering into the kitchen, where the children were busy with the stove. "Well, we're doing all right, Mum," Julie replied. "We've got tea, cookies and noodles. We can boil up quickly." "Yes, we'll have a snack and go to sleep. We'll make it till tomorrow," her son added. "By the way, where are the mugs?" Daisy waved his hand toward the cabinet. "Over there. Julie, take them out," the boy commanded briskly. When the children had settled down to sleep, Daisy cleared the table and found herself alone in the silence. She didn't want to move at all. She sat still, warming her palms against the warmth from the furnace and listening to the quiet. She tried to understand whether this house, once unjustly abandoned, had accepted her, Was it happy to have her now? Was it pleased that the furnace was warming up again and its rooms were filled with living voices? Daisy listened carefully and felt no rejection in response. So the house has been waiting, she thought, and will welcome its new inhabitants, who will fill it with joy and laughter. The house will repay us for warmth and comfort. Nothing in that tiny house had changed since Daisy's childhood. Here was the table that Grandfather had made with his own hands. Daisy walked over, placed her palm on the table's surface and smiled, feeling the familiar tiny scratches under her fingers. She remembered how often she had watched her grandmother skillfully handling the dough. Such simple magic. She had been mesmerized by the process. Grandma would beat a few eggs in a large pan, then add flour and milk. She'd knead everything thoroughly, place the dough near the furnace, and an hour later the dough would come alive, swelling, rising, becoming beautiful. Soon after, the house would fill with the familiar, beloved smell of fresh bread. It was a magical aroma, the scent of coziness and her grandmother's homely warmth. And her grandfather, he was a true magician too. In his hands, ordinary wood transformed into small birds, and dry branches became playful, harmless snakes. Daisy's bookshelf had a whole menagerie of grandfather's gifts, birds, snakes, even a puppy and an elephant. But most of all, Daisy loved the bears with their cubs. No one knew how long it took Grandpa, but he somehow managed to create real wooden fairy tales between his other tasks. A bear would lounge on the forest lawn, lazily sharpening its claws on a stump, while nearby the cubs frolicked, one climbing onto another's back, the third curled up against their mother's warm side. Daisy had given names to all 3 cubs, creating different stories for them. She would then share these stories with her grandparents, who loved listening to them. Now, neither grandmother nor grandfather remained, and Daisy herself was no longer little, but rather like a mother bear with cubs. Only the house had stayed the same. Even her child's chair had survived. Daisy's hand found it under the table. Her fingers instantly recognized the polished back and cushioned seat. She pulled the chair out and smiled. Then she sat it against the furnace and lowered herself carefully onto it. She leaned against the warm side of the wall, closed her eyes, and nearly dozed off. Suddenly, her phone vibrated in her pocket. The screen showed an incoming message. From her husband, of course. Since you chose to behave this way, stupidly and unreasonably, it's your choice. I want to warn you that all your cards have been blocked. We'll see how you behave from here on out. Maybe I'll change my mind later. I suggest you use your brain and common sense. Oh, great. He woke me up to make me happy, Daisy muttered, tucking her phone back into her pocket. Typical of him. After returning the small chair to its place, Daisy settled on the sofa, covering herself with her down jacket. But sleep wouldn't come. What if Lane isn't lying? Of course he isn't. Then we're in trouble, as they say. I don't have much cash. All right, I should stay calm. No panicking, she whispered. We've got property division and custody arrangements ahead of us, but that's for later. Also, I still have my car. Should I sell it? No, I need the car. So, there's only one option left. I need to find work. I've been at home long enough. Of course, Daisy had an education. Between having children, Daisy had led arts and crafts classes. Yes, this village once had a school and kindergarten, but that was long ago. The school closed about 6 years ago, and the kindergarten even earlier. There were no arts centres here. Where could she go? Well, there's enough thinking for today. I'll deal with this tomorrow, she thought, and whether from finding peace or pure exhaustion, Daisy finally fell asleep. In her dreams, she heard her husband's caustic voice. Well, well, we'll see how you manage without credit cards. You'll end up a milkmaid, living on one salary." In the morning the woman awoke to strange sounds. Something outside the window creaked and squeaked. Daisy got up from the couch and looked out. In the yard, her son Kevin was wielding a huge shovel. Seeing his mother, he waved, stuck the shovel into the snowdrift, and came inside. "Good morning, Mum. I found a shovel, and I thought I'd tidy up while everyone's asleep." "Oh, Kevin," Daisy said gently, brushing snowflakes from her son's bangs. "But you're only 14. You're still a child. You'll wear yourself out." "No, I won't," Kevin replied. "Remember what you always told me. A man is either a man, right away, or never." "Yes, I remember," Daisy sighed, smiling. "I remember everything. Go on, while Julie sleeps, finish clearing the snow, and I'll go to the neighbours and see if anyone will sell us some eggs for breakfast." She pulled on her down jacket and slipped into her still wet sneakers. "There are felt boots behind the furnace," Kevin remarked. "Why don't you wear those, Mum? And I'll put your sneakers near the furnace to dry." "Oh, Kevin, my clever boy, you've already explored the whole house. And yes, the boots would be the better choice," Daisy said cheerfully. It had been a couple of days. She'd already called the lawyer to have him draw up the divorce papers. Daisy had little cash, of course, but the children's savings came in handy. Once returning from the grocery shop, Daisy didn't find her son at home. "Where's Kevin?" Daisy asked Julie, who had just made tea, which smelled wonderfully. "Mum, Kevin went to the neighbours. Said he'd ask around, see if anyone needs snow cleared from their roof or wood chopped." She hadn't finished speaking when the front door slammed and a frost-reddened, satisfied Kevin appeared. "Mum, you're home already?" he asked, spotting her boots in the hallway. "Yes, Mum's in the kitchen," Julie called back. Just then Daisy's phone rang, and she answered without checking who it was. "You've humiliated me. I've never seen such insolence, and don't expect child support." It was her husband, his voice hysterical and uncontrolled. "What? Me? Just go away. I've heard enough," Daisy shouted, barely breaking through his endless stream of words. She couldn't bear to hear more of his accusations. She ended the call and immediately switched her phone to silent mode. Just then Kevin walked in. "Mum, look what I've brought." Kevin proudly placed 2 huge pockets in the middle of the table. "All honestly earned," he said, removing his jacket. "There's an elderly woman nearby with an invalid husband who can't walk. I cleared snow from their roof, then cleaned their barn and driveway. They couldn't pay me in money, but they gave me food instead. Fresh milk, a whole can, some butter, a bag of potatoes, plus some frozen meat and jam. Not sure what kind, but they say it's good." "What a haul! What a haul!" Daisy marvelled. "This will feed us for 3 days." Her heart swelled with endless tenderness for her son. What a wonderful boy she had raised, so much like his father. Daisy had avoided these memories for years, forbidden herself to remember. It had been too painful. But today, for the first time, the memories enveloped her like a warm blanket, different from before. She remembered her surprise back then, wondering at how handsome he was. He could have been an actor, yet there he was in the pedagogical college library. Back then she'd thought all handsome men wanted to be on stage or at least on TV, but Dave sat at a nearby table surrounded by textbooks, taking notes. The next day, when he saw Daisy, he gave a slight nod. This was normal. Students who often crossed paths would greet each other without even knowing names. Daisy returned a friendly smile. Dave immediately gathered his notebooks and books and came over. He pointed to an empty chair. "May I?" "Of course," Daisy said, adding silently to herself, "You can do whatever you want," then laughed at her own silliness. But what could she do? Love at first sight is complicated. Dave, it turned out, wasn't from the pedagogical college at all. "I'm writing a term paper for a friend," he explained. "These books can't be taken home, so I need a day pass." Daisy listened, fascinated. Though truthfully, his field of study didn't matter to her. She realised with surprise that he could have been studying linguistics or geology. It wouldn't have changed anything. She just wanted to be near him, listening to his voice. What followed she remembered hazily, without details or sequence. She recalled the autumn sun shining, golden leaves crunching underfoot. She remembered ice cream in waffle cones by the Embankment Street musician. They were so happy then. But just 3 months later, Dave left. One day, he simply didn't show up after classes. Daisy thought he must be delayed. He'd come that evening. But he didn't come that evening or the next day. His phone went unanswered. Separations are always hard, but parting from someone you love isn't just difficult, it's agonizing. Daisy spent the entire weekend in bed. Friends called, inviting her out, suggesting she move on, but she stayed home for 2 reasons. First, she secretly hoped that Dave would come. He'd call. However, after a week and a half of silence, it was probably foolish to think this. But blind hope persisted, slowly destroying her. No, it would be unbearable. How could she go on? The second reason terrified Daisy even more, bringing instant chills and sweaty palms. What if, while out with her friends, she saw him with someone else? Better to stay in the dormitory, busied in textbooks. Daisy passed her exams with excellence, but felt no joy. She would have preferred to fail everything. Then she'd have to study for retakes and wouldn't have time to think about Dave. She went to her grandparents' house in the country for winter vacation, and for the first time in ages, she was able to turn off her phone, push away her thoughts, and truly sleep. At home, even the walls help, Daisy thought as she woke up in the morning. She sat on the bed, wrapped to her neck in a warm blanket, and contentedly breathed in the air of her childhood home. Grandma had already baked buns, and the house was filled with her favourite childhood aroma. Daisy suddenly felt that everything would be fine. She was home. That meant everything would be all right. Here she was loved, supported and protected. New Year's Eve was coming. Grandfather would bring a tree from the forest. She would make paper garlands, and Grandpa would likely carve squirrels and hares from wood. It would be a celebration. She was so absorbed in these thoughts that when there was a knock at the door, she assumed it was Grandpa with the tree, but instead of his voice she heard another. Dave, ignoring her grandmother's questions, made his way into the room. "Daisy, let me explain." "Go away. Please just listen." He crouched in front of the bed and tried to look into her face. Daisy buried her forehead in the blanket. "Go away." "Please, just let me tell you. Daisy, my best friend, is dead. He was coming to visit me. I thought he'd arrive, and I'd introduce you to them." His voice cracked. "The car skidded. My friend couldn't react in time. Then he was upside down. I couldn't think straight. I was blaming myself for inviting him. Then I kept telling myself, I'll handle the arrangements, bury him, then call you. But I couldn't. You understand? I couldn't tell night from day. When I finally came to my senses, so much time had passed. I called, but you didn't answer. I went to the city, to the dormitory. They told me you'd taken your exams early and gone to your family. So here I am. I am sorry for your loss. But please, leave me. I don't want to see you any more," she repeated firmly. "You had said what you wanted to say. Fine. Now go away." Daisy did not raise her head, nor when she heard his footsteps toward the door, nor when they stopped dead. Dave lingered at the threshold, looking at her for a long time before leaving. "You shouldn't have done that," Grandmother said reproachfully. Granny, what's use in such love if he forgot about me in his time of trouble? Asked Daisy with a terrible pain in her voice. Perhaps you're right, dear, and it's for the best, her grandmother agreed quietly. Upon returning to the city, Daisy felt worse again. It was painful to see the streets where she and Dave had walked together. She dreaded going to the library, fearing he might still be there writing term papers. She also noticed she tired quickly and sometimes felt short of breath. Daisy was almost certain it was from stress, and was shocked when the doctor smiled and announced, "Congratulations, about 8 weeks." 8 weeks of what? Daisy asked, confused. Do I have only this time left? My dear, the doctor sighed and shook his head. You're 8 weeks pregnant. That's approximately. An ultrasound will give us a more precise date. Is that clear now? Leaving the clinic, Daisy was overwhelmed, walking, not noticing anything around her. Watch out! Someone grabbed her arm forcefully and pulled her back. Daisy barely had time to gasp before finding herself in a stranger's arms. What are you doing? She protested, but he cut her off. Why aren't you watching where you're going? You almost walked under a bus. Daisy looked back to see a large bus passing by. The driver shot her an angry look. Miss, are you feeling all right? Let's find a bench. What's your name? Daisy. Nice to meet you. I'm Lane. Lane walked her all the way to her dormitory that day, and when he asked for her phone number, Daisy confessed honestly, I'm pregnant, and I'll probably be a single mother, so if you're interested in me, you'd better forget about it. Ah, Lane nodded. Now I definitely won't forget. Will you give me your number? That's how Lane handled everything, simply without drama. Daisy liked that about him. When she was less than 2 months from giving birth, Lane said, We should get married, so the child is born into a family, everything as it should be. As for Dave, Daisy never saw him again. Kevin considered Lane his father. Now Daisy reflected on how Kevin had grown to resemble his biological father, in both appearance and voice. Dave would probably be proud to have such a son now. I was so foolish, she thought bitterly. I drove away the man I loved. I should have understood him then, comforted him. But it's too late now. Nothing can be fixed. The bus crept slowly toward the stop, careful on the icy road. The stop was situated in a peculiar spot, right across from the village cemetery. How long has it been since I visited Grandfather's grave? Daisy thought, reproaching herself as she walked toward the cemetery. It's sad that Grandmother is buried in another city. She had gone to visit an old friend just before her death. She passed away there, peacefully, simply not waking up one morning. It was a long journey back, with temperatures reaching 40 degrees. Daisy walked along the snow-packed path, occasionally glimpsing the inscriptions on the gravestones. It made her uneasy. She tried not to raise her eyes, avoiding memories of people she had known. Better not to think about it. Eyes downcast, she walked quickly forward, refusing to look around. It was just 20 steps to her grandfather's grave. Oh! Daisy exclaimed, nearly colliding with a man, standing with his back to her. The man turned slowly. Daisy? Dave? She recognized him instantly. He looked exactly like her son. They could have been twins. Only now Dave had silver streaks at his temples. Dave, is it really you? Why are you here? He shrugged. You probably won't believe me, but I've been desperate to learn something about you. I thought your grandparents were buried here. I couldn't remember where your house was, so I decided to ask around in the village. They told me I'd find your grandfather's grave here. They said you had been living in the city with your family for years, so I came to visit your grandfather at least. I have some relatives buried here too. How are you, Daisy? How's life? What brings you here today?" I live here now, in my grandparents' old house. Moved here with the kids a week ago." "Where's your husband? Still in the city?" "I don't have a husband any more," Daisy replied curtly. "We're divorcing." After a pause, biting her lip, she continued, "You know, Dave, this seems like fate. I was just thinking about you today, and I feel so ashamed about sending you away back then. You were going through such grief, and all I could think about was myself. I was wrong." "I was a fool myself, Daisy," Dave replied calmly. "I should have come to see you again, but I didn't dare." She smiled back at him. "You know, Dave, I think it's them. My grandparents made it, so our paths crossed again." "They probably did," Dave agreed. "I can't explain our meeting here any other way. Dave, let's go to my place. We've just moved, but we can have a cup of tea. Or do you need to go to town? Are they waiting at home?" "No, Daisy, I live alone, and tea is precisely what you and I need. You must be cold." "Well then, let's go check on my grandfather. I want to thank him for this meeting." "And I have a car. We'll get to the village in no time." Dave spoke with such sincerity, without a hint of pretense. He was genuinely overjoyed to see Daisy. That's just like Kevin. He never pretends to be something he's not. Daisy respected this trait in her son. After all, not everyone has the courage to remain true to themselves. After visiting Daisy's grandfather's grave and returning to the car, Dave began talking about himself. "I never married, Daisy. I work as a doctor in the city in a good position, but I haven't had children or a family. You know, you left such an impression on my soul that I found myself comparing every girl to you, unconsciously searching for someone like you, but I never found anyone. As for me, Dave, I was married and have 2 kids, and you're wrong about not having children." Dave stopped abruptly. "Are you joking?" he asked, hope and joy flicking in his eyes. "You mean that you and me?" "Let's go, Dave. See for yourself." As they drove up to the house, Daisy saw her son. Kevin was in the yard, clearing snow from the roof. Seeing the car stop at the gate and his mother with a stranger, he paused his work and jumped into a snowdrift. "Kevin, come, please. I'd like you to meet someone." "Dave, this is my eldest son," Daisy introduced formally as he approached them. "Kevin," the boy extended his hand. "And I'm Dave," the man replied, fighting back tears of joy. Only he knew what that moment cost him. Kevin was his spitting image. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Dave whispered to Daisy as they walked toward the house. "I only found out about that later, and I was too self-confident to call you and acknowledge that I was wrong. I am so sorry," Daisy replied softly, ensuring only Dave could hear. "I look like in a mirror right now," he whispered to Daisy. "Does he know about me?" "Come inside," Kevin called out hospitably. "Yes, Kevin, you and Julie prepare tea, and we'll be right there." As soon as Kevin closed the door, Dave gently gripped Daisy's shoulders and spoke hesitantly. "Daisy, move in with me. I have a big apartment. There's plenty of room for everyone. The school is nearby. Don't worry about anything. Village life is no good for children's education. I have the means. I'll handle everything. And this place? We can use it as a summer house." "Daisy, so you never told him about his birth father?" "No, Dave, I haven't." "All right. I'm so happy we found each other, Daisy. Darling, you're a miracle." Dave suddenly wrapped his arm around Daisy's waist and pulled her around the corner. 15 years apart. I've missed you terribly." Daisy laughed joyfully. "We've foolishly wasted 15 years without seeing or kissing each other," she said, melting into his strong embrace. "But now we have all the time to make up for it. Dave said, and their lips finally met. It seemed nothing could keep them apart now.